Hey everyone, Digital David here. Today in this video, I'm going to be checking out the Intel Core i9-13900K desktop processor. This particular CPU consists of 24 cores, 8 of which are performance cores, and 16 of the cores are going to be your efficiency cores, up to 5.8 gigahertz.
Don't forget, the link is much available in the description of the video, so don't miss out.
5.8 gigahertz for your speeds. Now let's open it up and look at the CPU. Here's our 13900K Intel CPU in our nice plastic case. Does have Intel's logo on the back, which is pretty cool. But check it out. We got our CPU here. Everything looks nice. Now let's go ahead, let's get it installed. So the motherboard that we're gonna be using is the MSI MPG. This is the Z790 Edge Wi-Fi motherboard. Keep in mind, there's a bunch of different makes and models out there. What's important to you is to make sure it has the LGA 1700 socket for 12th and 13th gen Intel CPUs. So this is what you're gonna have here. Pay attention with the little triangle icon right here. That's gonna be important to us as we go to line up and position our CPU. You'll notice on the CPU itself, we have a little triangle. If it focuses in right down here in the green, there's a little like golden triangle. Maybe you can see that, but also there's a slightly larger one on the CPU as well, right there in that corner. So you got the silver triangle to look for, and you got the little golden one to look for in the bottom corner. That's gonna line up right here on the cover. So we just press this to open it up. Do not touch, bend these pins, or anything like that. You're not going to want to do that. Here's a look at the back side of the CPU out of its case. So just gently line everything up. It just slides right in. Nothing else you have to do. And you can leave this cover on. It's going to pop off here in a second. So watch what happens. As we go to do that, you'll notice that the cover comes off before we even tighten it down. But there we go. We just successfully installed our Intel Core i9-13900K CPU. Not that big of a deal. You guys will be able to do it as well. If you need to remove it for whatever reason, you'll have thermal paste and stuff on here, but you can just repeat the step in reverse order. And there we go. Now we have taken our CPU back out. If you want to install it again, just line it up. I like to put the cover back on before I install it. Just a nice little safety check. And then as soon as we press that in, it's going to come right out. And we can just lock it down. There we go. We have our nice 13900K CPU installed. All right, we got our PC booted up. Let's look at some CPU specs. So first up, we got CPU Z. We're gonna...
Sure, don't forget, the link is much available in the description of the video, so don't miss out.
Click through all the different tabs. Feel free to pause throughout as needed to look at anything in more detail. But first up, here's all of our CPU information, followed by our motherboard info. Memory, we're using DDR4, graphics, and our benchmarking results. So we got a single thread score for our CPU of 890.1 and a multi-thread score of 1684 3.2. You can compare that to your own CPU to see how it does. Now let's go ahead, let's see how those scores stack up against the competition. So looking at the single core scores, we're up at the top, baby, with a score of 902. We got close to that. We got 890-ish. Look at that. Next in line, the 13700K, followed by 12900. So Intel's definitely taken AMD's lunch right here in the single thread scores. Showing 7950X is our top AMD CPU. Then we're going to go down further to the 5950X and the 5900X down here in the mid 600s. But we're up at the top in our single thread score. And then for our multi-thread score, again, 32 threads for the CPU. We're coming in at number 2, right under the 13900KF. So very close, almost neck and neck. And that's going to be a good amount above the Ryzen 9 7950X. So you're seeing that AMD comparison there. That's going to be where we're trading a lot of blows with, whether it's single or multi for our score. Then we have the 5950X coming in 4th place right there in regards to our CPUs using our CPU Z benchmark. Next, we have our Cinebench R23 scores. First up, our multi-core score, we got 3872.2 and a single core score of 2263 and an MP ratio of 17 8.11. Let's see how that stacks up against the competition. So looking through some Cinebench R23 scores and results online, I came across this nano review chart that was really helpful, giving us the current models and how they all perform. There is some ranking within the Cinebench app, but I like to use additional rankings to give us better indicators of the competition. But basically the 13700 and the 13900 dominate the top 20. And within the top 10, it's basically the 13900 show with the different variations, whether it's just a 13900 or the F or the K or the KS. You get the idea. But top 2 slots belong to the 13900. Our 13900K comes in 2nd place. 4th place is your first AMD CPU. That's the Ryzen 9 7950X. So you're seeing a pattern here across our benchmarking results. The 13900K is going to outperform the 7950X from AMD. Last but not least, let's talk about Geekbench 5. Here are the results of our tests. We got a single core score of 2232 and a multi-core score of 1831.7. Let's see how that stacks up against the competition. So no surprise here. Does this not look familiar? They're showing that the 13900K got a score of 2214, so very, very similar to our results right here. That comes in at 2nd place right under the 13900KF at 2232. And who would have thought, right above the AMD Ryzen 9 7950X and the 7900X respectively. That's going to be for our single core score and results. Now let's take a look at the multi-core score. So for the multi-core score, we're showing that the 13900K finishes in 5th place, below some Threadripper Pro Series CPUs and the 3990X Threadripper. And it's interesting to point out that the 13900KF finishes a little bit below the 13900K. And then we have the Ryzen 9 7950X. So they're all battling pretty neck and neck, but across all of the benchmarking tests that we conducted, the 13900K is going to outperform the AMD Ryzen 9 7950X. Now let's talk about the CPU and its temps. So there's a lot of different variables we have to go over, from your case to your configuration, your fan layout, the cooler you're using, the ambient air, the load you're putting it under. You get the idea. There's a lot of factors and variables that can change the results that you're seeing. In my experience with this particular case, first thing I want to point out, no noticeable difference in performance with or without the panels on. That's because this case just does such a good job with airflow. Not going to be an issue. So at idle, we'll just call it roughly 30 degrees Celsius is what we're seeing for our idle temps. It's actually fluctuating a little bit higher right now. It's been running for a while, but interesting. So should be around 30 degrees Celsius, give or take a little bit, is what we're experiencing with this particular build. But when we use Cinebench R23 to max the CPU out at 100% utilization, we're hitting that maximum 100 degrees Celsius. So some of you might be scared by that or nervous. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I don't know the long-term repercussions of having it continually hitting that heat level all the time. Now, for me and my use, that's not going to be a problem. But for you, you might want to maybe swap out your cooler, right? Maybe it's your case. But a lot of you is probably going to come down to just tweaking some BIOS settings. Some people say it's the new normal with these CPUs. Others say you can undervolt it a little bit. That'll fix your issue. Some say, like in my case with this MSI motherboard, that you need to go into the BIOS and tweak the power and core ratio limits. There's some helpful guides online that can walk you through that if you want to knock that down a couple of degrees and get it in a more comfortable range for you. From my understanding, basically with our MSI board right out of the box, it's kind of like it's already overclocked and we need to dial that back. But again, only if that bothers you, or again, I'd recommend that if you plan on maxing out this CPU all the time and you're using the exact same build that we have. So there's really not much left to say about this Intel CPU. It's a top dog for a reason. Fantastic performance.
Sure, don't forget the link is much available in the description of the video, so don't miss out.